Good morning, fourth year students. This is the second part of your lecture, Plato. From the previous lecture, we already had an idea about Plato's theory and also about its impact on the Greek culture. And then in this lecture, we are going to see what are the objections that Plato stated on the poets and literature in general. Okay, and of course it is based on his theory that you have already studied in the previous lecture. So, Plato's objections. You remember in the theory that we discussed, we said something about two worlds, spiritual world, material world, and how, according to Plato, the spiritual world is considered to be the real one, the ultimate one, the ideal one. It is the world of forms. It is the world where we have the original forms and shapes of anything which exists in the material world. So, one of the main objections that Plato had on poetry and literature in general, look here, he says, if ultimate reality rests in the spiritual world and the material world is a shadow or a copy. You remember this part of the theory when he said that the material world is just a copy. It is an imitation, a copy of the spiritual world. Okay, so taken into consideration this fact, then according to Plato and his followers, poets, okay, those who compose imaginative literature. So the problem here is what? The problem is that when poets create their poetry, let's say the writers, when they create their stories, what are they doing? They are creating something imaginative, which means that it is not real. And when something is not real, it means that it is what? Let's say it is a lie, or we can say it is just a copy, okay, of what you see around. It is just let's say an attempt to create something based on what you see around you in the world, on the physical or material world, okay? So the poets, according to Plato, are merely imitating an imitation. هو تقليد، هو نسخة. فكيف ممكن نعمل نسخة على شيء هو أصلا في طبيعته شنو؟ عبارة عن تقليد. So they are imitating an imitation when they write about any object in the material world. Okay, so this is the first objection, that the poets, when they write imaginary literature, when they write imaginary poetry, when they depend on their poetic imagination, what are they doing? They are imitating something which is already an imitation. We can say that, or we can say that they are creating a copy of something which is already a copy, which is what? The material world. So this is not acceptable by Plato. Look at this point here. Accordingly, the poet is two steps or degrees removed from ultimate reality. Okay, what we seek actually is to make people closer. You remember I explained this to you. What we need is to get people closer to the spiritual world, to the original, the ultimate world. So if we create such stories, if we create such fake, let's say, imitated stories, what are we doing actually is not getting them closer. No, on the contrary, we are getting them what? Two steps or degrees away or removed from ultimate reality. Okay? So these imitators, طبعا, you see, لاحظوا هنا شنو سماهم imitators. The poets are just imitators, according to Plato. Cannot be trusted. Okay, you cannot trust that a poet is able to communicate to people any good message. And this is the point. We want to communicate to people good morals, good messages, good values. Okay. The next point is Plato also argues that poets produce their art irrationally. Remember this word. We said rational means, in Arabic it means عقلاني. When I want to negate it, what do? I just add the prefix irrational. irrational, so irrationally. So a poet, and we all know that a poet produces art based on, you see, imagination, sometimes on feelings, personal feelings, based on his understanding, his own understanding of things, his own point of view, his subjective ideas. So, writing poetry for a poet is something we can say is very personal, very subjective. So, each poet is going to write something different from the other. Each one of them is going to see things from different perspective. So, instead of having one truth that can be taught to people, what do we have? We have several truths, and this is, according to Plato, this is wrong. You should teach people something, let's say, original. You have to teach them something which is common, and not give them several subjective point of views of something. Like, for example, if you want to teach them bravery, تمام شجاعة, maybe some poets would consider that bravery is a good quality in a person. Others would condemn or, for example, criticize bravery. Each one of them is presenting his own subjective point of view. So how can we trust a poet when he or she produces poetry based on what? His intuition. Notice this contrast here between things which are produced rationally and things which are produced intuitively. يعني عن طريق الحدث. A person who depends on his intuition, يعني إذا نقول بالعربي يعتمد على أحاسيسه، أو كيف هاي الأحاسيس تظهر له الأشياء، حقيقة الأشياء. You see, so it means that we have different points of view, and this could distract the audience and not be good for them. Okay? So the other objection, we can say, the second one here, we can say that Plato believes, or he actually argues, that poets are irrational, we can say, and they depend on what? Or let's say, as it is written here, relying on untrustworthy intuition rather than reason, العقل, for their inspiration. Okay? Because such inspiration opposes reason and asserts that the truth can be attained intuitively. Okay, so Plato rejects all that, and he believes that having such basic, let's say, quality in poets, like, for example, being irrational, intuitive, could actually destroy society, not help in improving it. So Plato in the end, يعني خلينا نقول نتيجة نهائية بعد كل هذا النقد، شو يقول Plato? Plato condemns all poets. اوكي، يعني خلينا نقول مثل يستنكر الشعراء، يستهجن، خلينا نقول يستهجن وجود الشعراء جميعا، ما عنده يعني فكرة انه الادب او الشعر ممكن يكون ذو فائدة. اوكي، هاي ايضا طبعا شرح اضافي ايضا للموضوع. Plato argues, and here we are going to see some examples to clarify what Plato means when why he rejects the poets to this extent. I mean, what's the problem with Plato? Let's see what examples he gives us. Plato argues that in the poet's works lies abound, lies, أكاذيب, lies abound concerning the nature of ultimate reality. How we can say that lies abound in a work of literature? For example, شوفوا هنا هذا المثال in the Iliad. الإلياذة طبعا تعرفوها، الملحمة الشهيرة. In the Iliad, for example, the gods, and you know, in the Greek mythology, we have gods as characters, we have mortals, we have heroes, etc. The gods lie and cheat and are one of the main causes of suffering among humans. See, gods, the gods are considered to be higher than men, right? But in these epics, what are they doing? They are lying, cheating, causing suffering to people, killing, oppressing people, let's say mortals. What about the human beings? Even human beings, look here, even the mortals in these works steal, complain, and hate each other. Such writings set a bad example for Greek citizens. You see? So we can say that Plato, خلي أكتب لكم إياها هنا. Sorry. Plato believes that we can say arts أو ممكن نقول شنو literature, anything which is related to literature or art. لاحظوا هاي الكلمة sorry undermines يقوض بالعربية إذا تشوفون معناها undermines society. You see, this is, we can say, one of the earliest خلي شوي أعطيكم إياها بشكل مميز الكلمة. This is one of the earliest attempts in criticism. لاحظوا هنا when he says such a thing about literature, he's criticizing literature indeed. So this is the earliest attempt at what? At showing a certain judgment against literature. Okay, but you see, unfortunately, this very early attempt is actually totally negative against literature. It sees that literature and arts in general undermines, or we can say destroys society instead of helping it. Okay, this word is really important here. It is, I think it's the most suitable word to describe what Plato means with his judgment against literature. Plato believes that art or literature undermines society. Okay? In the Republic. شنو اسم الكتاب اللي احنا جبنا منه كل هذا الكلام? We took from this book. We took from this book the theory, all these objections that we had about literature اللي هو بالعربية احنا شو نقول عليه؟ الجمهورية. سامعين بيه يعني بعضكم ممكن يكون سامع بيه كتاب الجمهورية المشهور لأفلاطون. Plato ultimately concludes that such people يقصد بهم منه the poets must be banished. يعني he doesn't only condemn poets, he also actually suggests that they should be, he concludes actually that they must be banished. يعني ينفى الشاعر يجب أن ينفى من المجتمع أو من الجمهورية الفاضلة مثل ما كان يسميها المدينة الفاضلة the utopia تمام يسموها utopia which is should be ruled by philosophers. يعني اللي يقرأ كتاب الجمهورية يشوف هاي الأفكار طبعا اللي هي يقول إنه المدينة الفاضلة من صفاتها من مميزاتها that it should be ruled by philosophers. And one of the things that he considered to be important is you should banish all poets. Don't keep any poets in this city or in the Republic. In a later work, لاحظوا هنا Plato seemingly recognizes society's need for poets. يعني بعدين شوية مثل غير رأيه and their craft. But he said that we need poets just in one case, which is what? To celebrate the victors of the state. واضح? To celebrate the victors of the state. Just in this case, we need poets. Any other, let's say, situation or any other kind of poetry is useless, or we cannot tolerate other kinds of poetry. فقط في حالة إنه الشاعر يجي يسوي يحتفي بانتصارات الدولة بإنجازات الدولة. That's the only case that poets are allowed to be inside the republic and to write their poetry. Okay? Only those poets, however, who are themselves good and also honorable in the state can and will be tolerated. See, just one exception, that the poets should celebrate the victors of the state. Other than this case, they are not welcomed inside the inside society and inside the republic. They should be banished. Okay, So it is, I think it's very clear to you. First of all, we spoke about Plato's theory of forms. We said that this theory is actually the basic theory which explains most of Plato's philosophy, but also here we benefited from this theory in order to understand his idea about literature. This theory has a certain impact on the Greek culture. We said that before this theory, before Plato, people in the Greek culture, they used to depend on literature and poetic imagination in order to teach people good morals. But Plato did not agree with this method of discovering truth and virtue. On the other side, he said that instead of using this method, which is presentational, depends on presenting something to the audience, we have to do what? We have to teach people abstract thinking. We have to teach them how to ask philosophical questions. How do we do that? We should improve, or we should that people actually in general should study, let's say, sciences or fields of knowledge like mathematics, like geometry, because these, let's say, fields allow them to develop or to improve their ability in abstract thinking. Okay. And then we said something here now about the objections. Plato believes that poets are creating imitation for something which is already an imitation, so they cannot be trusted. Also, they are people who create their art irrationally. They write based on their intuition, and this is untrustworthy and cannot be relied on in order to teach people anything good. And then he, of course, give us example about that, which is in the Iliad. We have cheating, lying, killing that happens, and it could be a bad example to people. And finally, I want you also to pay attention to the title of the books, yani in general, as we are going through the other figures in our history of literary criticism. I want you all the time to pay attention to the titles of the books for each one. اوكي، انتبهوا الى عناوين الكتب اللي احنا كل مره راح نذكر لكل واحد عنده فد كتاب او عنده فد عمل مهم. So in Plato's case it is the Republic. Okay, the Republic. Try to read the handout that I have given you. Okay, and pay attention to these details. In this book The Republic, طبعا ها كل هالحكي والنظريات احنا جبناه من هذا الكتاب. Finally, we said that only in one case that Plato allows the poets to be inside society, which is what? To celebrate the victories of society, of the state, sorry. So I think till now everything is clear about Plato, but of course, if you have any questions, if anything is not clear, you can ask me in the group. Thank you very much for listening.